Good afternoon, everybody. Back at our familiar venue, slightly different topic. Here with Paul, Deirdre, Melissa. Wanted to really focus on the budget. We submitted the budget back in early February. It's been 5 months. I did say back then we're making investments with this budget that could be transformative for our state and give everybody the opportunities they deserve. But nothing matters unless we break the back of COVID. So I'll just give you a quick update where we are right now, for old time's sake anyway. The numbers all continue really good. Our positivity rate continues to be less than 1%. One of the 3 lowest positivity rates in the country. Really proud of Connecticut on that front. Fatalities, 0. 0. We have not been that way in 8+ months. Let's see if we can keep it up. Let's see if people keep getting vaccinated, because this is a precondition to getting our economy moving again. I will say, I'm pleased to say that there are now no towns in the red alert zone. We had 1, Putnam, and now there are 0. So that's really good news. And we got to continue to get our friends and their friends vaccinated, and what that means. But what that means for the state of Connecticut is it really allows us to turn the page and move forward. And our budget is a blueprint, which gives you the guideposts on how we get that done. And we had a budget we submitted in February, and the basic contours are the same today. A real focus on those who have been hit hardest by COVID, and do everything you can to get them back in the game. Those are our kids, many of whom our schools have been open but haven't been able to get back to school, get them back into camp and school, get them back in the game, get their parents back to work, get our economy growing again. You know, it's a focus on economic opportunity for all, and it's a focus on economic growth, inclusive growth, get this economy moving again. That's the focus of what our budget is about, and what I wanted to talk to you about. We have the resources to get the job done. We have a budget that is made for this moment, a transformative moment that can really make a difference for our state. We have the resources. Our revenues are coming in very strong. Not because we raise taxes. I've always said we don't need more taxes, but we do need more taxpayers. And we have tens of thousands of more people paying a little more tax at the upper end. That's making a difference. And combine that with the American Rescue Plan, that's $6 billion over the next 2 to 3 years. And that's money I want to make sure we invest smart so we make that difference. We're waiting to hear from Mayor Pete and whether the infrastructure plan comes through, because you know what we need to do to speed up our transportation system as well. I'll tell you that Susan and I this morning spent a little time at Our Piece of the Pie. Our Piece of the Pie is a training facility for young people, teenagers, getting their first job, getting their opportunity. And there we were. I described, look, we've been negotiating this budget for a while. That's a little bit of a negotiation about our piece of the pie, so to speak. But more importantly, we are all here because we're united, talking to the young people behind me, that there's no dispute about we're making the investments in you, and making sure that this is an opportunity for you, fresh start at the starting line of life, what that means to make sure you achieve your dreams, and what that means for the Connecticut. We cannot afford to leave anybody behind. And that's what our budget does. Largest expansion in daycare and childcare in the history of the state. You know, there Beth By and I have been talking. We know how important those early months, years are to those kids to give them a running head start. And by the way, there's some, COVID reluctance in terms of people getting back to work. One of the problems is for those parents, those single parents, is the high cost of daycare and childcare. We're making it free or affordable to everybody, at least through the end of this year. We want to do everything we can to give those kids a running head start and get their parents back to work. We're also moving on in terms of the summer learning camps. We've got close to 250, I think it is, camps that have signed up, YMCAs, Boys and Girls, whatever, and we're giving them the funding they need. They are hiring now, free to virtually no cost for your kid, especially those kids who haven't been in school for a while. This is a commitment we're making. ECS funding, education cost sharing. On top of the $1.2 billion that the American Rescue Plan is giving to our schools to make sure they have the wraparound services, the additional support, the health care, the tutoring, vocational training they need. On top of that, we're fully funding ECS as prescribed by the legislature. Good thing to do, and we're doing that. In addition to that, a debt-free community college. I want to make sure that everybody knows that education doesn't stop K through 12, and make sure that's affordable for everybody going forward. Scholarships, the Willis Scholarship, Roberta Willis, great expansion of that, making it more affordable. And more broadly is workforce. Here we have a little bit of a discussion going with the legislature. They kind of like the workforce program, the way it's set up, think the status quo is good. I don't. I'm not satisfied with the status quo. I rarely am. When I was running for office a few years ago, we had virtually zero unemployment, and we had well over 150,000 jobs that weren't filled because we were not training people for those jobs. So I'm not satisfied with the status quo. We've set up a workforce council. We've got a group in place. We've got $106 million setting up certificate programs at all of our community colleges. 6, 8, 18 weeks of training, get you a job out there. We're really trying to turbocharge workforce. Let's not just pour money in the status quo. Let's make a difference going forward. I'd say the same thing about the equity fund. They're, working really hand in hand with our legislative leaderships. Matt Ritter's taken a real lead on this as well. And what we want to do there, we've put in place a $500 million multi-year investment when it comes to equity. And a lot of that is about environmental justice. Some of that is about the equity fund that we want to put in place, affordable housing. The equity fund is $300 million. The equity fund is $300 million that once you get your training, once you've had those job skills, give you some of the capital you need to help you start up a business, hopefully right in your very community. A real focus on our most distressed communities. I want this economic prosperity and growth to make sure that no community, nobody is left behind. There we're working very closely with the legislature. We know how important that is. Healthcare, Deirdre's here, so I'm not going to tread beyond my pay grade here, except to say there's some incentive. Let's expand healthcare, make it more accessible. Look, we learned the hard way, especially during this last year plus of COVID. Healthcare has got to be universal. It's got to be affordable, and it's got to be accessible to everybody. I don't think just continuing to raise the Medicaid eligibility is the right way to do it. Deirdre, who spent most of her life involved in Medicaid down at HHS, she can give you, some more insight. But what I do know is expansion of Medicaid would expand health care for about 8,000 of our citizens who otherwise aren't covered. We're going to work through the exchange, otherwise known as Obamacare, great expansion there at the federal level. That will provide service not to 8,000 people, but to 40, 45, 50,000 people. Much more bang for the buck. What a difference that makes. What a difference that makes in terms of prenatal support for undocumented, pre- and postnatal for up to 12 months now, not just a short term it is now. Deirdre can tell you more about what we want to do on health care, make it broadly available and accessible and affordable. On a personal note, the big insurance guys are getting about a $400 million tax cut. I'd like to trim $50 million of that off of there to make the co-pays and the deductibles zero or much less for anybody that can't afford it. If the legislature doesn't think that's a good investment, that's their call. Muni aid, municipal aid. We've had a lot of discussions about municipal aid. Connecticut will only be as great as its cities, and our cities are coming back. They're coming back strong. I love seeing the life. I love seeing the outdoor dining, but we still have to continue to make investments there. I want you to know that, coupled with the American Rescue Plan, we're going to have not twice, but 3 times as much municipal aid go into our cities and towns as we had just a couple years ago. 3 times as much, at least for the duration of the American Rescue Plan. In addition to that, Senator Looney's been a great champion of pilot payment in lieu of taxes. Those towns and cities have a lot of untaxed, not-for-profit properties there. And here we have a plan to double the amount of money that goes in the pilot from about $150 to $300 million. And there we're still negotiating exactly where that's placed, but I want you to know it's not for lack of money. We're making the investments we need. I really hope, working with our mayors and superintendents, that this money is well spent. I will say I want an honestly balanced budget. You know, I worked really hard with Melissa and our team 2 years ago. Let's say we'd had some budgetary problems before. They'd been delayed. We're lurching from crisis to crisis. Rating agencies were looking askance at the state. You know, our last budget took till October or something to get done. Well, 2 years ago, we got an honestly balanced budget. I say honestly balanced in two senses. It resulted in a surplus in year one, resulted in a surplus in year two. The rating agencies took a look and said, "Hey, Connecticut, you're getting it together," and they gave us a good grade, an improved grade. As I said, tens of thousands of people voting with their feet. So I want to make sure that the budget we have going forward is an honestly balanced budget. And you can't play games. You can't do gimmicks. That's what's got us into trouble over the last generation or two, to be blunt about it. Melissa and Paul are working hard, negotiating with the group homes. They took the lead, negotiating with the nursing homes. You can't put that off budget. You got to make sure that we budget for those increases in payments as well for those people. They deserve it, and I'd like to think we could have that resolved in the very near future. You know, transportation, as I said before, there's a lot of money coming from the federal government. We can let it pass us by because we can't pay our 10 or 20% share, or we can step up and make a difference. So I know it's not easy. I know that we got a transportation fund that's underwater. I know you didn't like any of the solutions we came up with last time around, but everybody's always standing next to me when we talk about speeding up the rail or fixing that bridge, and there's no such thing as a free bridge. So I'd like you to reconsider the highway user fee. Don't let them tell you otherwise. On big tractor-trailer trucks, the overwhelming majority of which are coming in from out of state, most of which are leaving the state, the same taxes, highway user fee as they got in New York. That's why a lot of the trucks end run New York. They go through Connecticut. This would raise significant money. And also the Transportation Climate Initiative. That allows us to have free bus service, which we started on weekends just over Memorial Day weekend. What that means for a working family, sometimes they have to take a couple of buses just to get to a grocery store, what that means. And I know everybody pays lip service to global warming and climate change. We got to step up and do our part, and we're not doing it alone. We're doing it with our neighboring states. It's not an easy vote, but I hope people step up and do that as well. So let me just leave on this front, and we'd love to take your questions, but we have an honestly balanced budget in front of the legislature. They've been considering it for some time. We got a couple of issues around the edges. My door is open. It always has been. My phone has been ringing. I'm happy to have conversations, but I'm not going to play any games. It's going to be a budget that's balanced, just like our last budget was. It's a budget that has resources to be transformative. It's a budget that is balanced. And I think that is so important. It's a budget that is progressive, as I said, in terms of expanding opportunity for everybody going forward. So progressive and balanced and bold. That's the budget I'm hoping the legislature will consider in short order so we can get this state moving again. You know, with that, as I said before, we got Paul and Deirdre and Melissa, and we're here to take any questions you may have.
Channel 3 Eyewitness News. News 8.
Good afternoon. Governor, are you talking to Republicans or are you talking to Democratic leaders? It seems like there's a bit of a teetering on negotiations, and I'm trying to clarify who you're talking to.
Well, Jody, you know me better than that. I talk to all the leaders, Republican and Democrat. My door is open. I've talked to a lot of the members as well. There's a lot of partial information in this building. That's one of the reasons I'm doing this briefing, to give you my best take on where our budget is, and work with the leaders to find common ground so we can get a budget passed.
The Associated Press.
Thanks, Max. Good afternoon. Governor, I just want to clarify, where do things stand? Like, are we just on the edge of having a deal or not? And also, you said you want them to reconsider the highway use fee and the Transportation Climate Initiative. Are they not in there as we speak?
I think they're in there. I just wanted to emphasize the importance of it. Look, what's very important for Melissa and me, and I'll pass this to Melissa, is the budget is balanced and that we have to make the adjustments necessary to bring it in under the cap, make sure it's honestly balanced in this year, the next year, and reduce any deficits in the outline years. We still have a little work to do on that, right, Melissa?
Governor, that's spot on. And just to emphasize, the governor has made significant movements in investing in progressive reforms and programs in his most recent counter to the legislature. Just to make it crystal clear, in year one of the budget, the governor supports an additional $250 million of spending, and in the second year, over $400 million in new spending. And that's to support the phase-in of the ECS formula that builds in more equity with some of the formula modifications. It's the commitment towards a $146 million tiered pilot. As a former municipal CFO, we support providing that unprecedented level of support to municipalities. Significant resources for nursing homes, resources for our group homes that we'd like to avert a strike. Private providers are receiving rate increases in this budget. Healthcare expansion in a way that serves a lot more people than originally contemplated. So this is about a budget that keeps all those progressive investments in, but does need to be balanced, does need to adhere to the principles the governor's laid out in terms of the spending cap, and we believe there's a path to do so with some compromise.
And Melissa, where do things stand with the group home strike?
Discussions are ongoing, and when we're done with this presser, we'll be re-engaging.
Okay, thank you.
Hearst, Connecticut Media.
Hi, sorry. So where exactly are the sticking points? I mean, Governor, you got the capital gains and the tax the rich portion of the Democrats has dissipated. So where exactly is the problem at this point? So close to dinner time.
You're right. I think there's a little appetite to raise taxes at this point. We don't need the money. You see the resources we're putting to work. I think, Melissa shared with me, two main concerns. A, the current budget coming out of the legislature is not in balance. It doesn't adhere to the spending cap. And a little back and forth regarding how we allocate the municipal aid money.
Okay, but there's so many accounts that are off the budget. Why can't one more be off budget?
Because that's just the attitude that got us into the fiscal pickle we've been in for the last 40 years. Look, we can figure this out, but the most important thing, Ken, is we're doubling the amount of money going to municipalities under the pilot MRSA program by itself. Not to mention the additional monies coming in from the American Rescue Plan.
Thank you.
NBC Connecticut.
Thanks, Max. So, Governor, I just wanted to understand where exactly is the disagreement? Where do you not agree at this moment with the Democrats?
Well, I tried it in the last question. Melissa or Paul, do you want to try it?
Melissa first.
Sure. We've made, I think, on the revenue side of the house with the consensus revenue improvement and even what we saw in May, that getting to a finance package should be relatively easily. We see progress there. The challenge we have is on the spending side of the house. We'd like to see some of the municipal aid, the increased municipal aid, remain on budget in the general fund and subject to the cap. Muni aid has always been a general fund expenditure and subject to the cap. That's an important principle that helps us to control our rate of growth in expenditures. We put forth a plan that does that precisely, where by the second year of the budget, 50% of the $146 million in muni aid will be in the general fund. That requires a little give. That requires a little scaling back of some of the new funding that was added. Not cuts like we dealt with in 2017, but we are going to have to do some prioritizing on areas where we make increases. We can do this and fund ECS. We can do this and have a doubling of our pilots, investments in expanding healthcare reform. There is a path to ensure that we can adhere to the governor's principles he's been consistent on, and also scale back some spending to achieve all of these goals. So spending is the area we're focused on. We are obviously we care about what happens after this biennium and the amount of spending that will rely on temporary funding that we're going to have to pay for. We will have to pay for this when we come out of the biennium. The positive of the revenue improvement is it gives us hundreds of millions of dollars more in ARPA fund to spend and invest in our state. So compromise is needed, and we believe there's a path to locking this down.
Yeah, I'll just add to it. As the secretary stated, the problem is unsustainable and unprecedented spending additions that have been added to the budget. There's duplication of current state government. There's growth in terms of new state, I would say, expansion of government that is already done. For example, let's talk about the Office of Pandemic Preparedness. We have a Department of Public Health and the Department of Emergency Management Services that have done an extremely amazing job in terms of leading our pandemic response and works in conjunction with FEMA. We don't need an office within DPH to already do a function that DPH is already doing.
Can you quantify? I mean, like, what is the dollar amount of how much more additional spending do Democrats want to do over what the governor is okay with doing for making sure that in year 3 we're not having to raise taxes to pay for this?
Yeah, I'm not going to, in the respect for the spirit of negotiations, I'm not going to put that number out there. But there are some really easy solutions where the legislature wants to make investments in food insecurity and workforce development and Main Street initiatives that come to $20 million that we can fund with ARPA. That's why Washington stepped in to allow states to make these significant investments. We have those resources. That's a very easy mechanism to drive down some of the general fund spending and leverage federal dollars. So there are a number of those, I'd say, softer adjustments that could get this over the finish line. Chief of Staff mentions the one area of where we're duplicating existing functions. We believe we can make progress with even inmate phone calls to be the lowest rate in the Northeast. There are a number of areas where there's compromise that could achieve this package, and you could achieve it in short order.
Hey, Christine.
Thank you.
Sometimes the language of this building confuses me. I want you to know that between ARPA and our budget, spending is probably up about 18% compared to last year. So when Paul and Melissa talk about cutting spending, it's an increase that's going from 18% maybe to 16% depending on the particular item. But we're talking about how big an increase we're going to be able to do this year.
The Hartford Current.
Thank you, Max. The Governor, one thing that hasn't been mentioned here is this 10-year deal for the cities, the 10-year deal that Speaker Ritter has talked about. There had been some talk that you wanted a shorter time frame, maybe 3 years or something like that. What is the latest on that?
I think you summarized it pretty well. Look, Matt is correct. He says, look, I don't want every year bonding to change. I don't know what our commitment is to affordable housing, what's going to happen. And I said, look, I think we should give some consistency and continuity so you know where our investments are going to be over a period of time. But what happens if we get 18% inflation rate in 2 years? You got to give us some flexibility so we're just not locked in and bleeding the taxpayers. So we'll be able to work that through.
Can you also tell us what is the biggest thing that you have given up? In other words, we're being told that capital gains has dropped out, consumption tax has dropped out, digital ad tax has dropped out. What have you given the Dems in return?
Well, first of all, it's the biggest, boldest, most progressive budget ever. I felt very strongly about the spending cap. I thought playing games with the spending cap is the type of thing that gets our state in trouble. But I'll tell you that, Marty and Matt said, look, MRSA, the municipal aid, was always intended to be outside of the spending cap. Nobody ever funded it, but that was what the intention was. So we gave a little bit on that. So some of that will be outside the spending cap and some will be inside.
And Governor, if I could just add a couple more just to give context. Again, I don't know if you were in earlier, but the governor is agreeing to $400 million in new spending in the second year of this budget and over $250 million in the first year. That's $650 million in new spending. And it's precisely to make sure we can make additional investments in education, in healthcare, in municipal aid, in private providers, nursing homes, group homes, all of these stakeholders that have been impacted by the pandemic, but really over the past decade have really been starving for additional resources. That is significant movement, and it's reflective of strong areas of alignment.
And one last thing, Governor, on the overall, you always look at the overall picture. And you've told us many times about the bond rating agencies giving the first upgrade in 20 years. The question is, all this spending that you're talking about here, obviously you don't want to do as much as the Dems. But are you going overboard on that based on what the bond rating agencies have said, or not?
No, I think we're doing the right thing. Look, this state and this country were hit really hard over the last 14, 15, 16 months, and I'm going to make sure we make the investments to get this state moving again. Look, most of this money, like I said, $6 billion, comes from federal support. I greatly appreciate that. I'm working like a laser to make sure this money is invested. It's not just a bunch of earmarks that go out and make people cheerful. And that's why I want to make sure those investments are sort of 1- and 2-time investments. If we show they work, then perhaps we get some more support from the federal government as time goes on.
And last thing, if I could, do you expect a deal? I mean, you've laid a lot of numbers on us here, and you wouldn't be doing this if you already had a handshake deal. Do you expect a deal in the coming 24 hours, 48 hours? What's your time frame?
I hope so. There have been a lot of deals that have been sitting around in this building going back 5, 6, 7 years, and we finally were able to get them over the finish line. I do find the final 1 yard line is sort of tough around here in politics, but I'd like to think we get there. But I will tell you, I'm not going to rush into a bad deal. I think maybe we've done that sometimes in years past. It's going to be a budget that's balanced, that we can look people in the eye and say, you know where we're going to be, not just in 2 years, but years going forward. And that's why the state's going to start growing again.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
News 12 Connecticut.
Governor, so you just said I'm not going to rush into a bad deal, but Matt Ritter is giving you a dinner time deadline to make a deal, or he says he's going to run the budget that's on the table right now. What happens if he runs that and it passes? Can you sign it in its current form? Would you not sign it? What's up with that?
Well, I don't know what's in there, but what Melissa has showed me in the past is not in balance, and it plays some games. So that's not something I would be, let's say, enthusiastic about. But look, we got plenty of time. Matt and I are good friends. That helps in a negotiation to have trust on both sides of the table. And as everybody knows, that door is open. So I'd like to think we can get something done.
But I just kind of want to clarify here. You say you're not enthusiastic about that, but if that's the budget, wherever they were at, I don't know, as of last night, this morning, if that's the budget that passes the legislature, are you going to veto it?
Look, I'm not going to support some budget that's out of whack, that is the same type of thing that's happened over the last 30 years, that leaves a big hole in year 1 and year 3. I think that's an answer to your question.
So Governor, I know that we've heard from the House saying that, we're willing to back off, the higher taxes on the wealthy, the capital gains tax. We're also hearing that the Senate may not be so enthusiastic about backing off that stuff. Do you think that the Senate will go along with that?
You better ask them. What I can tell you is we've got a bold, progressive budget that is the biggest investment we've ever had as a state, and we can do that without raising taxes on people.
I guess I'll direct that question to Melissa and Paul too. Senate leadership, are they showing any willingness to compromise on those points? Because that's obviously huge for taxpayers.
I'll say, as the governor stated, we're not going to speak for Senate leadership. You can be able to ask them that question directly. As the governor stated, he has what his principles are, which has been his same principles since he walked into this building in January of 2019. So he's going to stick to that and be consistent with it. So, John, I would say that's best a question for the legislators themselves. We don't want to speak for them.
And Melissa, I just want to clarify something you said a few minutes ago. When you mentioned inmate phone calls, the target may be making them the lowest, I guess, in the Northeast. Obviously, the legislature's looked at making them free. Just to clarify, is the governor's position that we shouldn't pursue them being free, that they should just be greatly reduced from what they are now?
The governor's position is that he has specific budget principles that he stands by, and this is a package of prioritizations. And as you heard me describe, they're significant throughout many other areas of the budget. We believe that, at least for starting point for negotiations, is to make them competitive. And the fact that they were at 23.8 cents and we were an outlier across the Northeast was something the governor stands committed to improve. Now, if there's a path towards further adjustments that achieves the governor's budget principles, as he's indicated, his door is always open. That's a combination of how we achieve the collective goals of the legislature and the governor.
All right, thanks, everybody.
The Connecticut Mirror.
Thanks, Max. Governor, Melissa, I'd like to go back to the spending cap and municipal aid just for a minute. I just want to give it a little perspective. Most municipal aid until 2017, close to 2/3, was not subject to the cap because we had aid to distressed municipalities as cap exempt. That all changed in 2017 to get Republican votes for a bipartisan budget. And over the next 5 years, we're trying to squeeze the pension contributions under the cap. A lot of your fellow Democrats, Governor, are afraid aid, particularly to poor cities, is going to get squeezed out over the next 5 years after the federal money is all expired. And that's why they're looking to carve out some money outside of the cap to make this a priority. I'll point out that they gave you a cap exemption in 2019 for your education partnership with Ray Dalio. Is what they're seeking that outlandish given the trends that we're seeing with the spending cap?
No, Keith, I think that they put in place a spending cap just 4 years ago in 2017 because they saw what was going on with the budget. It was out of whack early on, constant crisis to crisis, downgrades. It was not a good scene. And I think they wisely came forward and said, look, we're going to have a spending cap. We're going to grow within our means. And I think that was the right thing to do.
And if I could, Governor Keith, to further respond to your question, the governor has compromised. He has offered a proposal whereby 50% of the growth in pilot would be under the spending cap. Again, this is an unprecedented amount of aid. New Haven alone, when you take a look at their local fiscal relief funds, their education dollars, their tiered pilot is slated to receive $245 million. The tiered pilot increase alone is $49.6 million as compared to their existing pilot at $41.7 million. So this is a significant move on the governor's part. It reflects his spirit of compromise, and it certainly recognizes some of that historical precedent with muni aid.
Thank you. Just one other quick follow-up, and that deals with the bonding the speakers proposed for the cities. I'm not talking about the number of years we should commit over, whether it's 10 or 3 or 2. What I am curious about is whatever's agreed upon, say it's even just for the next 2 fiscal years, are you looking for them to cut a commensurate amount of bonding? In other words, if we bond $200 million for the cities, are you looking for them to cut $200 million or something out of education or open space preservation or somewhere else?
Well, I'll start. I mean, they put in place a bonding cap. These are all things I inherited. I didn't create these, but they all voted for a bonding cap. I think it's about $1.9 billion. We've got a consistent bonding in place for schools and environment that is up at about 1.6. So there's a little room. There's a little bonding cap room there. early on I was pretty tight on bonding. I thought we had relied too much on bonding, but you ask where I've maybe made a concession. I think we're willing to do more bonding. I'm willing to go to the cap, willing to do a little more flexibility there. I think it's the right thing to do. I think we have historically low interest rates, and I think it allows us to put in place an equity fund that can make a real difference.
Thank you.
Fox 61.
Hi, Governor. In regards to overall tax hikes, what's going up, what's not going up, at the end of the day, do you think Connecticut residents will approve of the budget you're hoping to put on the table and hoping to sign?
I think they will. I think we're going to show them this is money that's being invested that can make a difference not just for the next 2 years, but for the next 20 years. I've got to convince people that this is money that's being invested, not wasted. I got to convince people we're making the reforms, like I said, in workforce, like I said, in expanding health care. We're not just doing it the same old way. We're going to get you a little more bang for the buck, and we're showing you we can do it without raising taxes.
And then, Paul, you mentioned unsustainable spending additions kind of holding you guys back from meeting. Is there anything related to raising taxes in that pot?
As the Secretary stated, there's still conversations going on the finance side. I think right now there's very much a focus on where we are in terms of the spending. But we do know that there is a push to be able to create more room in each year of the biennium to allow for additional spending. And I think that is leading to duplication in state government functions and also policy differences in which the governor has with the legislature.
And then lastly, the regional climate change plan, that could trickle down and potentially increase gas prices, which when residents hear gas prices going up, they kind of have a lot of outrage against that. Can you talk a little bit and explain why that is still a benefit?
Yeah, it's a fee on carbon. It's a fee on pollution. It's a fee on asthma. It's at the wholesale level for the people that are selling this carbon, and gives them incentives to find alternatives. We're a competitive market out there. Some of them may pass that along to the user. Some may keep it the cost themselves, reduce their margin. I can't speak to that, but it does raise us $80-90 million. It does allow us to do free bus service on weekends. It does allow us to deal with environmental justice and get rid of some of those polluting areas that are causing asthma and comorbidities and things that really created, hell during COVID over this period of time. And it does shore up our transportation fund. There's no such thing as a free lunch. If people have a better idea, I'm all ears. I'm doing this with Massachusetts. I'm doing this for Rhode Island. And we're going to stay less than New York. So we're maintaining our competitive advantage.
Thank you.
The Waterbury Republican American.
Thanks very much. Melissa, I just wondered if you could just sort of give us the latest deficit projections. I mean, what are the budget gaps that are going to be closed in 22 and 23, and what are you projecting for fiscal 24 at this point?
So the projection for fiscal 24 ultimately depends on how much we use in the second year of the biennium from our federal dollars to support recurring costs. The budget that the governor has put together assumes around $800 million, and our fixed costs typically rise around $800 million. So going into fiscal year 24, it's possible we'll face a shortfall north of $1.6 billion. Obviously, that depends on a number of factors, revenue growth assumptions, trends in spending and things of that nature. So we're laser-eye focused on and making sure we can sustain the programs that we're investing in and controlling the growth in that deficit. We started this process facing a $3 billion plus dollar deficit. We will absolutely close it, particularly with the revenue improvement and the significant influx of federal resources.
Okay. And the equity fund that is under discussion, is that being moved off budget and out from under the spending cap? What's the status of that in terms of? structure?
The equity, sure. The equity fund is contemplated to be supported primarily with bond funds. Could also include federal ARPA dollars as well. So it would not directly impact the budget other than the impact on debt service, depending on the level of bonding we put forth through the bond commission. So as indicated, that is still under negotiation with Speaker Ritter and the legislature, but it would really be more so in the bonding side of the House.
Will cannabis revenue be included in the budget plan?
It is our intention that it will. The governor's policy team has been in negotiation with chairs, and they've obtained some agreement on how to distribute funds. We believe there's good compromise that has occurred there, and there's likely to be some element of support for the general fund, but we also recognize that there's a critical need to invest some of those resources back into the municipalities that have been disproportionately harmed, and the governor is in alignment with some of those modifications.
Okay, thank you very much.
Let me ask Melissa a question. You mentioned a lot of our increase is related to fixed cost. I think you said $800 million a year, which, by the way, is a lot more than all of our neighboring states. So it's like running a race with cement overshoes. But the good news is we are paying down approximately $1 billion in pension obligations this year. First time in the history of the state. Usually people shortchange the pension and say somebody else will pay later. Won't that save us in terms of our pension costs on an annual basis going forward, say 60, 70 million bucks?
Governor, you're spot on. We currently project a deposit to our budget reserve fund at $1.4 billion, and to close the year potentially with a $4.5 billion rainy day fund. Depending on the final budget we negotiate, we will calculate how much would go towards paying down unfunded pension liability. It's 15% of the following year budget. We're estimating that could potentially be around $1.4 billion, depending on any use of surplus or carry forward. That could be as much as $115 million in reduced pension costs. About 75% of that is allocated to the general fund. So for our general fund, that could be about $85 million in reduced pension costs. So there's a lot of positive news with respect to our revenue improvement and the fact that we have maxed out on our budget reserve fund, and we're doing the smart things like paying down unfunded liability, and that those are the things that our rating agencies recognize and applauded us for, as well as our fiscal discipline that achieved the ratings upgrades. And those are the types of things that we want to maintain.
I guess I'm getting the signal. Thanks to Paul and Melissa and Deirdre. Thanks for being there. A lot of questions about, do you think we can get this over the finish line? And I just want you to know, if you negotiate in good faith and you see things from other people's point of view, and you make sure that it's a win-win in any way you can. Look, Millstone was no walk in the park. They said they were about to shut things down when we first took office, and negotiated something that keeps the lights on at least for another 12 years. I remember about the same time, Connecticut's suing the hospitals are suing Connecticut. We reached a good deal, and we worked like this for the hospitals all during COVID. I can tell you that iGaming, I take it people have been negotiating that for an awful long time, and you work with people in good faith, you get the job done. We got the budget done 2 years ago on time. It was honestly balanced. I think people working in good faith, we're going to get it done this time as well. I sure hope so. My door is open. Take care, everybody.